Hello! It's very nice to be here. It feels kind of like a family reunion or Christmas in always the same space. It's kind of surreal. It's been a long time. Hello, my name is Josh. I've been making games for 10 years, and for 4 of those years I've been doing that full-time. So 10 years is a long, long time, and why? Why would I want to do that? It's because I like making things, like as a baseline. Like as a kid, I would make board games and comics and stop-motion animation. I would do like a bunch of things. I also, like 10 years ago, had a very hard time to be around people. It was very scary. And it took a couple of years. And then when I came here the first time, I was super nervous. I think I talked to Mateusz, who isn't here today, and to nobody else, because I was so scared of being around people. And making games, I wanted to be like a movie director before I started making games, but you need to talk to a lot of people to make a movie constantly. It's horrible, but I could make games alone from my bedroom. I started by using Scratch, which I learned because I got caught skipping school by my IT teacher. And he said, oh, you can't be unsupervised, so he pulled me into his class where I learned this. And then it turned out like, oh, wow. This really suits me, like the baseline logic of what I'm doing here, just putting these blocks together and then things happen. Games are also an unexplored medium, which is really nice because I love making new things. Like for me, it's always much more important what the idea behind something is, or like is this something that has never been done before or something, than the actual execution of the thing. And because games are, compared to literature, games are a very, very young medium, and so it's much easier to do new things in games. But when I started, the goal was to make basically anything at all. The resolution. I dropped Scratch for Stencil in like 2014, and I uploaded my first game to Newgrounds pretty much 10 years ago. This is how it looks. This is obviously the work of a beginner. This is another game I made. At the time, you're like a mushroom, and you can teleport to these other mushrooms. And then I got more and more into making games because I was really scared of being around people. And I watched Indie Game the movie, and I learned about this whole subculture of people who make games. And they're all very dedicated people. Like, this is what they want to do. And at the time, I didn't know what I want to do. I was really depressed. I wanted to die, actually. But it's like, oh, cool, these people are really obsessed about what they do. And I want to be like those people. They offered me some sort of role model of like how to live my life. So I made more games in 2016. This is one of them. This is interesting. This is the same game I showed you before with the mushroom, but now it looks nicer. Now it looks like Downwell. And it plays better, whatever that means. And then I made a game called Pong, which is Pong, but you play the ball, which is gonna, the twist is gonna happen now. Wow, you can like get behind the paddle. And I got validation from that. Like I was very insecure, I couldn't go outside. I dropped out of university because being in a lecture hall was it was impossible. It was just paranoia and shit. So I get validation from making games. I really like it. And I said, okay, I want to get better at making games. Like, I want to be able to make games consistently. So I make 1 game per month in 2017, which is this. I didn't get better at working consistently. I would always like rush in the last few days to get anything done. But my standards for what I could release onto the internet without dying of shame lowered drastically. So I could just release garbage. And I would feel bad about it, but the cool thing is when something is released, when it's finished, it's real. And it's no longer a dream in your head, it's a concrete thing, and you can actually really see how specifically you suck, which is painful, but pretty useful as well. And then, I was really intensely isolated, and I was like, okay, I want to be around other game developers. I came to Graz, I think in 2016 for the first time, and realized, wow, there's a lot of people here who make games. So I moved here. Which was a very good decision. I was listening to a lot of Edgar Wasser and Aesop Rock at the time. I'm just including these for good measure. And I also want to be around people all the time, even when I can't go outside to go to the meetup. So I started a private Discord server for other people who are just sitting at home making their games, which turns out to be really useful. And a lot of these people are still my friends. I also start to exhibit at conventions. I go to conventions and I show my stuff. Like I've been making a game per month, so I have a lot of games to show. And what happens, because I go to these conventions, is experienced people start encouraging me, which is Johanna Pirker, which is here, Michael Hartinger and Georg Hopmeier, who are all pushing me to this day, kind of inviting me, forcing me to do these things that I wouldn't do because I'm very lazy, but that are very good for me. The most important of these people that I meet is Edu Wertz, who's a Spanish developer with like face tattoos, kind of like a gangster. And he tells me that I should learn how to use Construct, which is this engine. And he really encourages me to make games. And he asked me to make a prototype for him, which is like this little bicycle game. And because of this, because he asked me to, I learned how to do box 2D physics, which will be important later. That game, funnily enough, turned into like an actual, real, like full production value game, like I think 5 years later or something. It's just kind of cool how that happens. Edo Wertz also got me a publishing contract for Pong, the game which is Pong, but you play the ball, which I showed before. With a shitty publisher from Spain. They gave me like €3,000 to make the game in 3 months, which I never did. Because I didn't work on Pong back then, I got invested in other stuff. I became obsessed with juice and polish, which was very much like the fashionable thing to do at that time in game development. There's 2 very good talks. One is The Art of Screen Shake by JW, which is very well known, and the other is Make It Wiggle by Ditto, which nobody knows. But these 2 talks are super, super good. And helped me like to develop my art style over the next few years. Instead of working on my video game, I started to make GIFs for validation, because still, very much, I'm unable to interact with normal society or whatever. But when I put a GIF on Twitter and it's clever, then people click like, and I feel a little spark in my heart. Over the years, I would make like 2 hours and 10 minutes of GIFs. Like that's an insane amount of just output. Which, yeah, is pretty important for building up the follower base on the internet that would then later buy my games and allow me to do this full time. And I get obsessed with mechanics at the time as well, with like the baseline interactions, the interactions that make up video games, where you have an action and a reaction, and then you can mix them up and get many, many clever mechanics out of that, which make people on Twitter happy. I also get very invested in Kisho Tenketsu, which is a Japanese story structure, which I use to make these kind of puppet theater things for Twitter, where I don't develop a full game. I develop something that looks like it would be a full game, and then I carefully play it so that it looks like it's a real game, and also tells a kind of story, again, just for Twitter likes. One of these GIFs is this thing here. I think we have time to let it play out. I was like trying to combine comics with video games. I put it on Twitter, and that went like viral. It got like 10,000 likes. And publishers started contacting me, and I was really excited. Like, oh my God, I should be working on Pong, but this is really cool that now people are like paying attention to that. I listened to a lot of Forest Swords and the Chromatics at the time. I'm saying this because I have this very vivid memory in my head of a Chromatics album playing as I get on the bus to go to a conference, where I would often be so broke at the time that I couldn't really pay the bus tickets, but then I would go to the convention, the publisher would pay for everything, and for 3 days I would enter this like realm where money was not an issue, and then I would go home and not be able to like get back from the airport without like skipping the ticket stuff. But I go to these conferences and I can't really connect to the people. Like, it's nice to hang out, but I still feel a little bit like an alien. And also, I'm living off of savings at the time, because I quit university, I quit the hostel job I had in between, and I have these 10,000 euros that my grandmother had saved up for me all my life until I turned 18, and then she gave it to me. And I decided the best way to spend that money was to spend it on pursuing my dream of becoming an indie game developer. This is really fucking stressful. Like, I feel like entropy, like I'm just sucking resources up without giving anything back. I'm getting like mental problems from this. I watch a lot of Ghibli documentaries about Miyazaki, who's a very sad man. And then this is how I spend a lot of my time in this like testing room for Pong, which I eventually start to make. I finished the game 3 times, sent it to the publisher. 2 times the publisher sent it to an experienced developer who said the game sucks ass. The 3rd time, the experienced developer was like, just move on. I give a talk about this in 2018, which is exactly here in this spot. It's kind of surreal. The problem with Pong was that I didn't know what I was making. I just got a publishing contract, and I was told, like, oh, make an indie game and we'll sell it. But I don't know why, like, what is this game about? I don't have a kind of strong pull into it. And so I struggle really a lot with development. And then the publisher flees Europe. Like, they just break all their contracts and flee to South America, and they're on like Interpol wanted lists, and I'm standing like in front of the ruins of my life. It's very, very funny, very, very shitty at the time too, because I spent all of my savings on this game that is now never going to come out. I become really interested in flow, and this like idea of making levels that perfectly like flow and blend into each other, of like difficulty curves that never really challenge you too much. And I make a game called Pendulum with the physics that I only learned because Edo Wertz told me to make a prototype for him. I moved to Spellkollektivet. This is when I leave Graz and never really come back, sadly. I'm very sorry about that. Spellkollektivet is a place in Sweden. It's like a house in the middle of the forest where you live with 30 other crazy people who only want to make games. I make a game there that is about non-gameplay. It's like the idea is that you just keep playing until you lose, and then you just start playing it again for no other reason than your personal enjoyment. That's going to become important later. My parents pay my rent. The savings are all spent, you know, but my parents, that rhymed. My parents recognize that I'm doing this obsessively, and they decide, they would have supported me if I went to university. They stopped supporting me when I quit university, but now they're like, okay, you're really going for this, so we're going to pay your rent, which is very nice. But again, I have intense guilt about this. Like, I feel really, really bad about this. I write an article about the 3 ways of designing games where you either work, you steal, or you explore. That's going to become important later. I meet Finn and Johnny, who are close friends to this day, and we collaborate on a game called Ord. We just want to learn how Steam works. We want to start selling stuff. Like, I really want to make money. But it's very hard for me to make money because I kind of hate money, and it's this strange relationship where I don't want to compromise what I'm interested in for money. But that's what you have to do if you make money. So we want to learn how to use Steam, the Steamworks interface and all of that. And we make Ord and release it on Steam. And then the interesting thing, that didn't make a lot of money, but the interesting thing is that we then polished it up and gave it to these console and mobile publishers who would sell it for us in exchange for revenue share. But because we own this thing, this is ours, like according to intellectual property law, we own this thing we made, we just get money from it without working. And I kind of start to realize that work and profit is not really related that deeply. I get really, really invested in Masaki Yuasa, who's a Japanese anime director that I encourage you all to check out. I make a little prototype which is super hard to control, like most of my stuff. The cool thing here is that it has a kind of like non-linear level structure. You can see it here. Like when you die, you just kind of stay on the same level, and when you succeed, you like ascend 1 level. And here, in my head, I break the kind of connection between like the linearity of levels. I realize that levels don't have to be linear, and there's other ways you can order games. I started Patreon because I really need money at this point. I really feel like shit. I make a game which uses a lot of physics. Like, I learn a lot about physics here. It's not a cool game, but I learn a lot about physics when I make this game. I have a complete breakdown because of the money and because of social stuff. Like, I'm surrounded by 30 people in this house, and when you put 30 people in a house and don't let them leave for a while, it's just going to get a little bit crazy. I have a complete breakdown, and I moved back in with my parents, which was always kind of like the lost condition of what I thought I was doing. I was like, this is like the worst thing that could ever happen to me. But they were very kind. They were like, okay, obviously you're like super fucked up right now. You should get a job, you should go to therapy, and you should take medication. So I started to take antipsychotic medication, which made me realize that a lot of the like anxiety in my head is actually just in my head. It was a very calming experience to be able to go shopping again without feeling judged for buying like a sausage or something. So I start to want to make specific games. I don't just want to make games, I don't just want to make money. Now I want to make games with meaning. So I make a game about a character who can walk on the wall, and then at the end of the game you can walk on every wall, and suddenly there is no more gameplay because all of the puzzles get removed if you can travel on any surface. I make a game called Worm, which is about fear, which is what happens when you run away from your problems for long enough. You kind of get used to running. And then at some point you will realize that actually, ooh, wow. I start to pitch Quamp to publishers. I work in a hostel again. I forgot to put that on the slides. I work in a hostel again. I start to pitch Quamp to publishers because I want to do this full time, but I need money for that. I get a funding offer for 125,000 euros, which is way too much. Like, I'm really scared. This is a kind of strange thing where to get that money, I would have to kind of corporatarize. It would be a responsibility. I would need to like do a lot of paperwork and stuff. It's just too much money. Like, I'm living off of like 500-600 euros per month. This is too much. This is crazy. So instead of responding to that funding offer, we make Gutwhale instead. Because I lost my job because the pandemic started and the hostel closed down. So I was like, can we make a game, put it on Steam, which I learned with Ord. Can we put a game on Steam that makes more money than I would have made in the hostel in 1 month? We do that and it works out, but it's the meaning thing kind of gets lost. Like, I have to focus so much on just getting anything down that I lose something that I want to express in that. Then I get a small loan of 10,000 euro from Mario Zechner to make Quamp, which allows me to quit the hostel job. But in between that, I finally managed to make a game with meaning, which is like this little game where you turn into a frog, but you don't really realize it while you play it, which I think is really cool. I move in with my grandmother, and the pandemic allows me to not feel bad about being alone anymore. Like I was really struggling with like dealing with people and with society or whatever. But because everyone is locked inside, now I don't have to feel bad about that. And a huge like mental load is lifted from me, which is very nice. Of course, it's a terrible event. We finally managed to finish Quomp, which looks like this in the end. And this is where a lot of the stuff of like my interest in flow and my interest in all of these mechanics and these like structures, all of that stuff I was really interested in while I was making GIFs, all of that kind of like comes to a conclusion here. And it's a very linear game that tries to tell a story of what happens when you achieve what you want. Because what happens when you achieve what you want is that you realize that you've just broken out of a box and you've entered a slightly bigger box. And this shit never ends. It made enough money to like pay back the loan very quickly, and then it kept making a little bit more money. And then I played Limbo and Inside, which are highly linear games that tell a very meaningful thing through gameplay alone. And I realized, oh shit, they have done what I wanted to do with Quomp already 5 years ago with much higher production quality. And I also played Disco Elysium, which opens my brain up to the fact that text in a video game doesn't need to be kind of low in caloric density and can be an actual literature thing. So I feel strongly like I need to make something different. I need to kind of move away from what I've been doing. And so I make this little puzzle platformer prototype where instead of really carefully crafting a solution, I just kind of give you some tools and don't care about it. This is going to be important later. I start to write essays where I like critically analyze games and try to really understand how they function and not kind of like be like, I enjoy this or I don't enjoy this, but like, why is it like this? What is it trying to do? And I would start to want to make a narrative game, and I start working on Producer 2021, which ends up looking like this. It's a very like crunchy, the art style is completely different from anything I've done before. It's a text-based game, which includes a lot of story stuff. So the question is, it's a narrative game, but what is it about? And because I have no life experience except making games, I take this little paper I wrote a couple of years ago about the 3 ways of designing games, and I kind of like blow that up into a narrative where you talk to these 3 creative people who each represent one of those things from that thing. It's kind of a self-referential, again, kind of sterile thing in the end. I become really interested in systems because I play Dark Souls and Disco Elysium, which kind of use this like dynamic filtration system where you put points into stats, which then allow you to access different content. This is a really fascinating thing for me because I've been mostly working with linear stuff until now. I get really worried about money. Like the money that we made from Quomp is kind of running out, and I need to make more money. So then a really strange thing happens because we managed to sell the intellectual property of Quomp to Atari, like the original company that made Pong all of those years ago. This is like a cosmic coincidence that allows me to keep going for the next few years, which, you know, that's not really something you can aim for. I have a small stroke. I've been smoking and drinking and eating and doing other very illegal things. And so my body just gives out and I like spend 5 days in the hospital. I start to get healthier, I start to go hiking, and I start to engage with my friends again, with all of the people around me, and I start to kind of like invest energy in these relationships, which I haven't done for a long time before. I get really obsessed with Dishonored 1 and 2, which are like these immersive simulations, where Dishonored 1 is really immersive, and Dishonored 2 is really focusing hard on the simulation aspect, and I kind of critically think about that a lot. And then I get commissioned by the Briefs, which we've already heard about today, to make an absurd game. And so it's like, oh, I remember this like little puzzle platformer I made where I just give you some tools without caring about the solution. Now I can use all of the physics knowledge I have built up over the years to kind of make something that is really fluid and dynamic and analog and allows you to come up with creative solutions. That turns into Mosalina, the browser version, which looks like this, and it's very hard to control. And I just kind of make that and move on with my life. It's going to be important later. I finished Producer 2021, which is like probably the happiest production time I've ever had, where I work 4 hours a day. The other 4 hours, I cook, and I go for walks, and I think. And what happens when you step away from the computer is that your brain just keeps going in the background while you're just chilling. And then suddenly the brain is like, oh, here's a connection. And so and then, you know, I go back to the computer, do another 4 hours of work on the next day, and then think again. It's like a perfect feedback cycle of work. It's really, really fulfilling. So the game doesn't sell very well, but I realized that I can sell 1,000 units of almost anything because there's this group of people who followed my work for all of this time, and they will just kind of give it a shot. And so I know that I will sell 1,000 units, and I need to make some money to recover the cost of making this game. So I price it very highly, and I make like a strategic decision about making money. So that I can recoup, so that I don't go broke. So I hate, oopsie. Oh, that is actually, That is actually very bad because this laptop is, I think I got it when I started to go freelance, and it will just shut down in 5 minutes. Thank you. It's a small breather, actually, just so we can all relax for a little bit. There we go. So I realize I can make money strategically, and I have like control over economics, and money is inherently evil, but I can deal with it a little bit. I traveled to Argentina, and I realized, oh shit, you know, like I have not just been getting my rent paid by my parents and been living with my grandmother where I pay very little rent. I'm also like in Europe, which is such a big fucking privilege, but that kind of only becomes like really lodged in my head when I leave Europe. I get into the Rabbit program, which is an accelerator program in Germany, and I get scared about money again, because the money from Atari is at this point running out. And I decide to sell out. I decide, okay, it's time to try to meet the market instead of just making my own weird shit and hoping for the best. So I look at what is going on in indie games and stuff at the time, and it turns out, as Liz Ryerson has said, that video games did not end up becoming the dominant medium of the 21st century. Short-form online video is. So video games are subservient to online video. And so you have all of these games that are really like visually appealing, like Vampire Survivors and stuff. Gameplay is kind of out of the equation in the indie space here. Like there's not a lot of focus on actual mechanical input. It's much more driven to like a systemic progression. And so we're living in the age of systems and content. And so I also want to make the opposite of Quomp still, you know, like I'm still not really over having invested so much time in all of this linear stuff. I'm interested in systems. And so I decide to sell out. I pick from a list of prototypes that I have that are all kind of like ready to become a commercial game. And Mosolina is just the one that fits the best into the current economic landscape and that I also want to make. So Mosolina looks like this. This is like the culmination of all of these little prototypes where you just get some tools and then you can do with them whatever you want, and I don't really care how you solve a level or if it's even solvable. I meet a business developer in the Rabbit who's called Anke, who kind of forces me to enter this game into the Steam Next Fest, which is something that I would have never otherwise done, which has turned out to be really profitable, so danke Anke. I finally start fixing my taxes. I will not go into this for legal reasons, but at some point, some friends trap me in a room and tell me they will not let me out until I contact the tax attorney. I get a book, my friend Lisha gives me a book called Finite and Infinite Games, which is like a Christian book about philosophy, which is really useful for understanding how games work. And I read The Dispossessed a lot, and I listen a lot to 1000 Gex and Brutalismus 3000, which is kind of like a stark deviation from the type of music I listen to usually. I go to Amaze 2023, where I'm nominated with producer, I give a little talk, and in general, it's like, wow, this crowd there is just my people. It's like strange weirdos who are also into like making games outside of what the market wants, kind of. I dance for the first time in my life in a club. This is huge. This is like something I've been kind of like fixating on as a sign of me being able to exist in society, because I just couldn't. But now I can, and it's quite nice. Yeah, I'm whatever. No, I will not tell that story. I get really scared about money again. Like I'm kind of convinced that Mosolina will sell well. Oh my God, we're out of time. Kind of convinced that Mosolina will sell well, but I get scared about money, and I ask the people who usually help me when I'm in trouble if they could like provide funding if Mosolina doesn't sell well for the next project, which they do, which allows me to kind of relax and let go. But still, I lose faith in Mosolina's core promise, which is the randomness, that you just get random tools and I don't care, and I start to invent all of these structures. Then I listen to a lot of John Mouse, who's absolutely crazy, and that kind of reminds me like, oh shit, I have to be radical. I have to go for radical randomness. And in general, I kind of like explode into life. Like I stopped wearing shoes. Like I just walked barefoot through the airport and like took a plane to Copenhagen. Nobody would stop me, and I realized I can do what I want, you know, like. Mosolina comes out essentially after a very stressful period, and Mark Brown from Game Maker's Toolkit makes a video about it, and in general it sells very well. And then a guy called Rolling Barrel makes a level editor for the game, which is crazy, and I just be like, wow, if you want to spend so much energy on making like a level editor, like you're on the team, and I put him on the team, and he gets a royalty share, a revenue share, and he kind of like, we keep working on the game together. I move into the city because I decide now that I can dance in a club, I can also live with other people on a day-to-day basis. For some reason, I can't concentrate anymore. And then, yeah, we keep working on Mussolina. We keep doing these updates. They don't really feel right. Like my heart is not in it. See the last slide. I become interested in anarchism, probably because of like the failure of the Western world to stop the genocide in Gaza, which is a whole other like thing that just kind of like takes up a lot of space in my head. How these systems we live under don't give a shit about what we want. It becomes very clear in the last year. Fucking shit. There's also too many people around me. Like everywhere around me are people, and I kind of like cannot stop myself from accepting invitations and meeting people. I've expanded my social circle radically, but my capabilities of how many people I can handle have not expanded in turn. I lose the energy reservoirs. I kind of overextend myself, and I lose the thing that made me really happy in the last year. Like I slowly kind of like lose my energy. I can't work. I become passive aggressive. And then Rolling Barrel finishes the multiplayer update, which is really nice. So now we have multiplayer in Mussolina. The game sells like even more. I can now, like we do revenue share. I get like 50% of the money that project makes. And I can live from that for another year if it stops selling anything at all today. So it's like the biggest success. It's also very like confirming to see the market like responding so positively to something that is genuinely hostile and strange and weird. It's kind of a confirmation that if I don't hold myself back, if I don't listen to the invisible audience in my head and just do what I want to do, there is a way where I can keep doing this without being really poor. And so I moved back into the suburbs, back to my grandmother, where it's very calm and nice, so I can kind of like calm down and slow down and start working again and like get that energy back that I lost in the last year. A few days ago, I gave a talk in Budapest, which was all this information. It's just 3 times longer. Yes, right now, a few hours before, I edited this talk on this chair outside. I'm currently giving a talk. So what did I... Oh, this is strange. Okay, I'm not sure. Now it's all off the hook. Maybe the order is wrong here. I've been making games for 10 years. What did I learn? I need to follow my interests. Like when I try to push myself to make something that will sell, but I'm not interested in it, I just don't do the work. Like there's nobody to force you to make an indie game. Nobody wants you to make an indie game. You have to want it because, you know, we have enough games. I enjoy working with concepts much more than I enjoy working with like a specific craft, right? Like I like the idea behind things much more than anything else. And that really kind of like comes through in a series of prototypes I've made over the last few years. Like this is one of them, for example. The concept is that you move and you spawn projectiles. And then here's another game which uses the same concept but looks radically different and has a different structure and a different progression and whatever. But it's the same concept. And then this is Geballer, which Felix and me made together. I don't think he's here today. Which is, again, you know, you kind of spawn these objects yourself. This is me trying to make a systematic game without knowing how to code complicated stuff. And then this is the last iteration of the same idea, which now kind of moves more in the direction of like organisms or something. So I take this concept and I work it over and over again. This has been going on for 3 years, I think. Just sometimes picking something up and then dropping it again, because I'm more interested in the concept behind it than the actual realization. I'm an extremist. That's also what I learned. Like I tend to really bounce between extremes. I extremely isolate myself and then I seek a lot of people. I really work and then I really don't work. Like it's a lot of like bipolar things, whatever. Limitations force me to get creative. Like a lot of the reasons that I'm doing all of these things is because I don't know how to code properly and I refuse to learn, which then forces me to really try to play in that space that I have. And I like to collaborate with people who don't need lots of directions. Like I've done a lot of collaborations in the last few years, and the type of collaboration I enjoy is where the person that I'm working with is getting a kind of area of the game that belongs to them, and where they kind of like want to do something with it. I cannot manage people. It takes too much energy from my head. And the techniques that I use in working, which is like where I just try a thing 500 times, I run against the wall, you know, and then at some point I break through it. Those techniques from work don't translate well to personal relationships. I cannot kind of like just run against a person 500 times until they agree with me. That's not how it works, sadly. No, it's not a sadly thing. I've also realized that I've had a lot of help in this speedrun version of the talk that didn't shine through as much. But at every step of the way, there's people from outside who were caring for me and trying to push me to do new things and kind of just support me, which is really nice. Some of those people are in this room right now. And I learned that it's time to start giving back. Like, I have spent 10 years really intensely making games. I have to find some way to kind of like give back to the community, which there's one way I will do that I cannot talk about right now. But it's also just, yeah, I have to figure out how to do that. Basically, what I want to do now is I want to keep working. I want to keep making games. I want to hopefully not overextend myself that much, and I hopefully don't want to hurt people in my environment as much by applying these like techniques from game design to real life. Because for a long time, all I knew and all I had in my life was making games, and that has kind of changed. So I'm looking forward to kind of like slowing down, and I want to keep working because in the end, I really just fucking love making new things. And video games is just a medium where it came the easiest to me and where I got the most reward for the least work. Thank you for your time.